All right. Hey, everybody. If you're joining us, I'm so glad you're doing it. I usually run this show through Be Live and Facebook, and we're trying something new. We're actually using YouTube, so I hope you're joining us. And if you don't see it now, don't worry about it. You'll get a chance. We'll promote it later. But welcome to the Yes and Brand Show. And I feel like I need my own theme song. I really do. I'm going to work on that.
You do need a theme song. you whatever that may be. Oh, it's that wonderful theme song.
I should get that. I should just, what I do is I usually would sing an intro just off the top of my head. I'd say, hey, get your coffee, sit down, come running as fast as you can, get yourself over to the Yes and Brand. Woo! Something, whatever, you know.
Oh my gosh, just, look at that. You have your own little jingle. There you go.
My jingle and my jangle. Welcome everybody to Yes and Brand Show. I am so excited because I've got somebody, I love talking to cool people who do cool stuff. And we have Ann Wynn today. And she is the founder of Amplified Marketing. And many of you already know her because she is a force, let me tell you, out there in social media. No, she's a force. Like, I am a storyteller and a content person and a comedian, but she knows social media. I mean, she knows it. She knows it. And she's out there doing amazing stuff. She's also the host of Women Who Mean Business, and that is a great show. And I had the pleasure of being on it a couple of days ago. So I feel like, you know, Ann and I have seen each other a lot this week.
It's not a bad thing.
It is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Welcome to the show, Ann. We're happy to have you.
Well, thank you for having me. And this is new to me, too, because I'm so used to using different platforms for live stream. So I'm like, oh, wait, I'm on Skype. Where else do I need to go? But you said, you know, through the technical magic that you do on the back end, I don't need to be anywhere else, which I find kind of cool.
Yeah. No, you don't need to be anywhere else. So it's all through the magic, the inner workings and stuff that I don't want to. If I look too close under the hood, then I'm like, no, shut that hood back. I don't want to know. But we're gonna talk.
Well, you're much smarter than I, being able to use OBS, the OBS integration. We talked about it a little bit in the live stream I was on this morning. I just want something user friendly where I just click a button and it goes woo live.
It's exactly. Well, we'll see how this goes. I will say this before we jump into the content of the show. One of the things that's always hard about experimenting with something new is that you realize, especially with video, how dependent you are on bandwidth speed. And if you have variable speed, and I'm on like high bandwidth network here in Silicon Valley, but if there's a lag in speed at any point in time on my LAN, well, video, right? And so nothing is perfect, but what I love about live streaming is nothing is perfect. It's
exactly. Nothing is perfect. Something will and possibly could go wrong with tech, whatever it is, but you just roll with the punches. It's a very good analogy for life too, because life isn't perfect and you kind of just roll with the punches. Yes and
life. And that's how the show got its name. And we love talking to really amazing people who've done really cool stuff. They've come from all over the places. You know, we've talked to people in tech, we've talked to entrepreneurs, artists, comics, and the one commonality is the central tenet from improv, which is, you just said it, life doesn't always go according to plan. It never does. And so one of the things you have to do is you have to yes and your way to where you want to be. And you might plan one thing and then life goes the other way. And I think with anybody who does anything great in the world, you have a vision, but you may not know how to get from step A to step Z. And you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to take one little yes at a time, and one yes to get to B, and then B to C. And it's like climbing a climbing wall. You don't know how you're necessarily going to get there, but one step at a time, you find your way. And you're a great example of somebody who does all this amazing stuff. You've got this amazing background. You've got this great little, this Southern drawl, which I find very charming. And I love it because it's charming. It's like super charming. And
it throws everybody off. It really does, because obviously, if you were to look at me, I'm Asian, right? You see my name, and then you hear this Texas accent come out of me. And it's so funny, I don't even realize it. It's so much a part of my speech that I don't realize it. And I don't, it's not an affectation.
No.
And so it is funny that you say that, because it's one of the first things people will often say when they speak to me in person, whether on the phone or meet me in person. They're like, Texas drawl. Well, I've been in Texas since I was 4 years old, so it's kind of like if I grew up in London or England, I would probably have a British accent.
Absolutely.
It would be really elegant.
It would be totally elegant. Like my son said to me yesterday, he goes, I really wish that I had an accent. And I said, well, I think you do, because other parts of the world, you would have a California accent. They'd say you have an American accent. So you do. It's just we don't think of it that way, right?
Exactly.
We all do.
Exactly.
We all do. Well, so you run Amplified Marketing, and you work with a lot of B2B companies, sort of mid-market, mid-size B2B corporations. You, I know, have a background in you came out of corporate, and you came out of banking and some other industries. What was the impetus for you to go, you know what? I am done with that. I want to start my own company. So we'll start there and then see where it goes.
Well, as you mentioned, life kind of throws you curveballs, and you say yes, and then you have to make a pivot. And
yes.
I always like to say, I'm people don't worry about being on plan A or plan B. I'm on plan like J or something. And the alphabet has 26 letters, and then you can go on from there even. So I've been on my own as a marketing consultant for about, 2019, for about 4 years. But my background has been in marketing and advertising for probably 15 plus. Oh, I think about it, I'm like, 17 years.
Yeah.
And I have been in various other industries like banking and things, and I think that everything that I've done has gotten me to this point and helped me to this point. So regardless of what industry it was, it has helped me along the way to get to where I am. So again, yes, and I moved into a marketing business on my own, and I'm pretty much a solopreneur. Again, I hate to use buzzy words. I know you do too, but it's probably the best description of what I do. I work with different companies and different individuals and different things like that. I wanted to be a solopreneur for a while because of where I came from. I'll back up a little bit a few years ago and how Amplified Marketing came about. I had been in a sales role for different companies, and I was good at it. I was good at sales because sales kind of goes hand in hand with marketing. But I wasn't uber happy, right? I was good at what I did, but I wasn't uber happy. The very last company that I worked for was in the payment industry, and they wanted the sales folks to sell a specific solution that I, in good conscience, could not sell. It was not a good choice or option for small business. It could possibly get them into financial trouble. And I'm like, it's easy money for a sales rep, but how am I going to go to sleep with myself at night, or go to sleep at night? And so I didn't sell it, and it was a big brouhaha. And so I really wanted to leave. And at the time, I had met my friend and late business partner, Steve, who had come on board and was a partner for the company I worked with because he was doing e-commerce sites and stuff like that. And he saw how unhappy I was, and he goes, could we do this ourselves? And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, could we, do payments ourselves? And I said, well, there is a structure where we would partner with a larger processor, but we would be autonomous and have our own company and be able to sell, ethically.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
What a concept.
So he said, okay, I'll do it. My other business partner, I will invest, and you'll run the company. And I went, what? What do you mean what? It really took me about 2 weeks to say yes. Not because I didn't think that I could do it, but I couldn't imagine somebody else wanting to invest the capital and in a company and start something for me. And also I didn't want to let them down, right?
Yeah.
And so I said yes. And then we started this company, and unfortunately, about 2 years into it, we lost him. He passed away all of a sudden one evening. Sorry, I still get a little emotional talking about it because I spent the next year really in this black hole of just grief.
Yeah.
And when I was coming out of it, I decided I couldn't do this business without him anymore, or without him. I didn't want to do it without him, and I didn't bring on another partner. So I thought about what could I go back to easily that I knew, and marketing, of course. And so I started Amplified Marketing and working by myself, and that's part of the reason why I've just been by myself for these last few years, because it was just too difficult to lose him. lose a partner and lose a friend.
Yeah. No, I can, hey, we embrace all emotions here. We're all fully flesh bags and all of that, what that means. And if you've got to listen to your emotions, and emotions matter. I mean, as human beings, we forget, business isn't like us leaving our emotions in the car. We're fully out there in the world, bringing all of who we are to everything we do, and listening to our emotions as a barometer of what we need in our life is a beautiful thing. And, that's a tough situation to be in. And I can understand where, there's that loss, and what do you do now? And I think stepping out on faith after, I don't think you never move on, you move forward. You never move on from grief. I think you move forward. And you took those steps to through your grief to say yes to small little steps to find a new path, which is pretty amazing,
Yeah.
It's,
and I still often thought, and I still think too, because I only had him for a very short time as a friend in here, and I was like, okay, so what purpose did I serve in his life, and vice versa? I mean, why were we only allowed to have him for such a short time? And some of the things that I do now, I think he helped to push me in that direction, like with social media, with really a lot of social media. And it's so funny because he was such an introvert and he hated social media, but he understood it so well, and he helped me to understand it. And here I am, doing all this stuff with social media. And so I think that was part of what he was intended to bring into my life. I mean, there's a purpose for everything that you meet. And I think that's part of it. And, but it's right. You don't move on from grief, you move forward. So he's always going to be a part of my life. And it still blows my mind that when I talk about him, I do get emotional because it's been a few years. It's been about 5 years now, but he meant so much to me. It was such a huge part of my life.
It's so true. And I love the way you said that. I think we got deep here, everybody. We got super deep here.
We're super fast on you guys.
No, and you know what? It's interesting because what I love about the passion of especially women entrepreneurs, and I think it's true of entrepreneurs in general, but what I love about women entrepreneurs is that they are more willing to just go there and embrace all those emotions. Look, we are not walking transactions in the world. We are fully human, and all the emotions drive us to make choices we make, and we cannot separate our emotions in business, and we shouldn't. And for me personally, business is personal, and how can it not be? And so when you have entrepreneurs, you've got to be fueled by emotion and passion and all these different things. How could you not be? I just think that women embrace all that, and they're not afraid to be badass and show emotion and all this other stuff, which I think that is what makes people connect with you,
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with you. I mean, you'll hear the saying, oh, it's not personal, it's just business. But business is personal.
It's very
especially
personal.
If you have your own business, because it's very personal to you.
It's very personal.
It's personal to your family. It's how you make your livelihood. It's how you support your family, whatever that may be. And so it is personal.
Yeah, and you've got your name on the door, especially as entrepreneurs. That's our name. The buck stops with us. So when people say it's not personal, well, it is, because that's my name. It's my reputation. It's my credibility. It's my blood, sweat, and tears. It's everything. So how can it not be? And so you've come up the other side. And again, we move forward through grief. We don't ever, I think, move on. And you're doing this amazing stuff, and I love that you say, people come in our lives to teach us stuff. And I think that's so true. The good, bad, and the ugly. Sometimes people come in our lives and we're like, please leave. And even those interactions that aren't pleasant, maybe somebody's toxic, whatever, there's something, I think, to be gleaned from that interaction that makes you look at yourself and say, okay, here's what I don't want. Here's what I will put up with. Here's the boundaries that I should have had higher expectations of myself to not allow that. And so all those things, I think, are good. They teach us something,
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've long thought that. I've long believed that, even when I was younger, that everybody was in your life for a reason. It's not just a cliche.
Yeah.
They really are there to teach you something, whether it's to teach you that this is not the type of person you want to be around, or this is the person you want to emulate, or you want to learn from. And as I've, gotten older and gone through, a little further down this road,
yeah,
I love the fact that I'm able to meet folks like you and like Mia Voss. You mentioned Mia earlier when we were talking briefly, and just really, truly amazing women and also men who I truly want to learn from. And I always like to say, if I'm the smartest person in the room, I'm in the wrong room.
Oh, I agree. I'm in
the wrong room, right?
No.
I don't want to be the dumbest person in the room, but I certainly want to be out of my comfort zone, because that makes you just want to elevate yourself and grow.
Yeah.
So, and how can you grow if you're not amongst other people who want to make you grow?
Yeah, everybody who ups your game. And I love that too. I always joke that, like, if it's like property value. If my house is the highest property value in the neighborhood, we're all screwed. Because we should rise together. And it's like, if I'm like, I want to be in the same neighborhood as that multi-million-dollar mansion, because that's good for my zip code. That's all goodness, right? We ought to rise and fall together. But you mentioned something that I love, you, because again, you can't get past the beautiful accent, which I think is charming. And you mentioned you came here when you were 4, and tell us about that. And what was that like? I mean, I can only imagine being a child, picking up everything as a child, and the bravery of your parents to go on faith, to step out on faith and take you to a place that they thought would give you a better life. I mean, can you tell us a little bit can you boil the ocean in a few minutes on that?
And it's such a relevant topic, and I am thankful that you brought it up, and you're not shying away from it, because there's such controversy right now around immigration and things like that. And you're like, oh, why does everybody want to come here? I'm like, well, I'll tell you what. Those people who are risking their life and limb and they're bringing their children, they're not doing it for shits and giggles, which is what everybody seems to think, right? Which is, forgive me for a minute when I get on my soapbox. It pisses me off. My parents did not make that choice lightly. My parents made that choice because they knew that if they stayed, we would be in danger. I'm Vietnamese, so this was Vietnam, and during that era of the Vietnam War, and it all coming to an end. Very similar to the way that these parents make this decision today of taking their children and making a dangerous trek, whether it be from Syria, Turkey, wherever it is, into Europe, or from Mexico, South America, Latin America, into the United States. They are not taking it lightly. They're not coming here because it's a better life. It is a better life, but it is a dangerous trek, and it is a dangerous choice. And it is not a decision that one day where they woke up and went, oh, hey, let's just do this. So I want folks to understand that. And my parents chose to do that because my dad had served in the South Vietnamese military, which was backed by the U.S. And once Vietnam fell and the communists took over, he would have been put into re-education camp. Prison, basically. And so the United States was making every effort, thankfully, to get everyone out that had supported them, that had worked with them. Many of us did get out. And we were very fortunate to have gotten out when we did. But there were many who were left behind as well. And so that... literally, I tell this story, and I'm going to tell it super quick and brief because I want people to understand, wow, how fast it happened. And it's just so much a part of my life that I don't think of how amazing it is. But people are like, really? Wow, that's how you left the country? So just a quick little history lesson. Vietnam fell on April 30th, 1975. Saigon fell. Saigon was the capital in the South. On the morning of April 29th, which is the day before, my dad flew onto my grandfather's farm and picked us up in his helicopter, because he was a helicopter pilot. He flew those 3 helicopters that came in and picked up all the troops on the field, and picked up my mom, my 2 brothers, my aunt, so one of his siblings. And what I just learned recently, even 2 years ago, was that the rest of the family was supposed to come with us. My grandparents, anybody who could fit on that damn helicopter was supposed to come with us. But my great-grandfather could not leave his country, and he did not want to go. And so because his father did not go, my grandfather could not leave him. And so that also has just brought up some weird emotions for me.
Yeah.
Like, how cool would that have been to have had my grandparents here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. All the feels today.
Feels are allowed. My company is called Keeping It Human, and we're all human, man. Yeah.
So I just found this out a few years ago even. So anyway, my dad picked us all up. We went to an island off the coast of Vietnam where other military families already were. And the next morning, once everything really went to hell, the U.S. military got us out of there. We piled into a cargo plane and they flew us off that island, and we landed on a carrier. You guys may be familiar with it, the USS Midway, which is now a museum in the San Diego area. And from there, we made our way through some other refugee camps, and 2 months later made our way to Camp Pendleton, who had put up a very quickly, too, again, if you read history, a makeshift refugee camp for this influx of Vietnamese refugees. So we were there in San Diego for about another month or so, and landed in Houston on, appropriately, I should say, July 4th, Independence Day. So that's where my Texas accent comes from. I grew up here in the Houston area, and thankfully for people who decided that they wanted to help us and sponsor us, we were able to, establish a life here. And so those are my immigrant roots, and that's why I'm still very passionate about making sure that we have those opportunities for others.
Yeah. I can only imagine the bravery that takes. You uproot everything you know. You have to leave so much behind because if you don't...
We literally just had the clothes on our back.
That's it. I mean, you had very little window to get anything out. You had no chance to get anything but your lives. Pick up, go to a new country, start over, rely on the kindness of strangers, on the open hearts of people who could embrace that spirit of democracy and say, this is what we're about. Not know anything, not know any English, you're a 4-year-old, and the courage I think it took of your family. I'm in awe of your parents and how you talk about ultimate faith and just knowing that you are sacrificing so much to give your children something better. I think we never give enough credit to the bravery of people, especially in other countries where during war, help us, whether Syria or, in Iraq, translators, people who put themselves in harm's way, in Vietnam, who in Korea during the Korean War, people who helped us and deserve so much more back. And I'm in awe of anyone who comes here just really believing in the better angels of people's spirits, because that is just the ultimate of yes and. I can't think of a bigger yes and.
You're right. It's completely a yes and moment. And my parents were absolutely so brave. And so many other people, so many other families that have stories similar to ours.
Yeah.
My parents are not unique in that.
Yeah.
Our families don't speak either. But it's, as I've grown older, as I've grown older, I've realized and become much more grateful, appreciative of what they went through. I realized, again, as a kid growing up, you're just like, okay, my parents brought me here, blah, blah, blah. As an adult, you think, oh, wow, all the things that they had to go through. I mean, my mother was 25 at the time, 24, and my dad was probably in his early 30s. I think about when I was 24 years old. I was in Boston, I was in school, I was worried about, what party am I going to next? I didn't think about, okay, how am I going to get all my kids to this country where I know nobody, don't know the language, and start all over again. I mean, that just blows my mind when I think about that.
Yeah. There's no question. My grandparents lived in Tucson, Arizona, and they had a neighbor who had come over from Vietnam, and they their kids and grandkids came over in the 70s to get out of the war, to get out of before Saigon fell. And they came, and I remember I would play with the kids. The kids didn't speak a word of English. But what I remember so fondly in visiting my grandparents every summer was that here it is, Tucson, Arizona, smack dab in the heat. I would play with these kids that were my age, 7, 8, didn't speak much English at all, but it didn't matter. Kids would just play.
Let's play with each other.
There's no walls. You would just, somebody would pick up a ball and throw it to you, and like for hours you would just play, and then I'd eat lunch at their house. Very few words were spoken at all, but there's something about kids, just accepting kids and playing with kids, and I still remember that. In fact, even one day I was over there for hours at their house, and my mom didn't know where I was, and she was panicking. And then when I came out and she discovered I was there, she was totally okay with it, but it was like, where did she go? But I think the ability of kids to just accept and play and not question,
yes.
It is such a, and I still remember that. It was a beautiful thing. And, yeah, that's
yeah. And you're absolutely right. I mean, and it just kind of speaks to, I guess, the innocence of kids too.
Yeah.
Right? We'll play with anybody. It's another kid we'll play with. We're not going to think about, that person is not, white, not, that person's brown, Hispanic, whatever it is.
Nope.
You just, hey, it's a kid with a ball. I'm going to play with this kid.
Yep.
And not to really get too deep into this point, I think that as we grow older, we're taught, or we take on these, I don't know, prejudices or whatever you want to call it, because kids don't really think about that.
Kids don't care. I mean, really, literally, they could not speak English, and I didn't speak Vietnamese. So, and I remember one of them had a bike, and it had a seat in the back of their bike, and they kind of motioned for me to get in the seat. So I get in the seat, and I remember riding around parts of near the University of Arizona, that campus right there in Tucson, and I'm literally 2 8-year-old kids riding a bike. I don't know his name. He doesn't know my name. We can't speak a word of a common language to each other except for the language of children. And we're riding around having the time of our lives. He's riding around his bike, and I'm sitting in the back. Whee! It's like no words were spoken. But I think you're right. I mean, not to get too deep, but I think there's the beautiful nature of kids who just accept and don't care.
Yes.
Know.
Just accept and go on. And so it's a beautiful thing. And I hope that we can all continue to be.
Yeah. I hope so too. I really hope so too. And I think, to me, being a yes and person in life also means yes anding other people, and yes anding when situations change, and saying yes and to things. And the beauty about yes and is it's not fear-based. It's not, I'm afraid of this, or I'm afraid of you, or I'm afraid of the other, or I'm afraid of. Yes and is really about whatever situation you're dealt with in improv. Because you can't predict. Somebody will make it, we call it an offer on stage, and it doesn't matter. You have to embrace that, and you can embrace the other person for who they are and where they're at, and embrace yourself. And the spirit of it is so positive to me. It's affirming. It's not no but. It's yes and that tells you something. To move forward together in a scene, we have to say yes. And that, I just love that. I just love that attitude. It's affirming. And yes, people laugh at me. All my improv friends are like, you are such an eternal optimist. And I think you kind of have to be an entrepreneur, and to do and step out on faith and do the things that people like you and I and many men and women do who want to change the world in our own little way. We have to kind of be of that nature. Do you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, I agree. We do. We have to be that yes and person and step out on faith, because life isn't perfect. It's not perfect. Life throws us curveballs constantly.
Yeah.
And if you're not the yes and person, if you're like, okay, yes, this happened, and this is how I'm going to move forward, or this is what I'm going to do, then you're going to be stuck. And I know there are lots of folks who are stuck, and I think that's part of why I wanted to start that show.
Yeah.
Because I wanted people to understand that successful folks or folks who are further down the journey didn't always start out that way.
Yeah.
We have our challenges. We all have, hurdles that we have to get past. And I wanted it as a means to show that how these women, these amazing women, got over those, overcame those challenges. as well as being inspiring for that person coming up behind, but also talking about the people who went ahead of us. I mean, that's how we learned, and those were the ones who inspired us as well. And so that's why I wanted to show. So in this sense, it is a yes and show.
It's a very much a yes and show. And for folks who are watching now or will watch later, Anna's talking about her Women Who Mean Business show. And it's a great show. And we were talking about, I was listening to her interview with the wonderful, our mutual friend, Mia Voss. And what I'm so struck by is the common spirit of every person that you talk to, Anne. You have to go on faith. It is a yes and, because you know that, okay, this isn't working for me. I have a vision, and if I can't do it here, then I have to carve my own way out there. And entrepreneurs are very much driven by moving forward. That's the nature of who we are. But I'm also super inspired by the honesty and the refreshing honesty in your show and of your guests and people like you, because, and I really agree with what you just said. It's like, sometimes we think entrepreneurs, the hustle and the grind, and we're crushing it and we're killing it. And we never talk about the hard stuff. There's hard shit, people. If you don't like hard shit, trust me, do not become an entrepreneur. Don't. It's not for you. Go do something else. If you don't like making mistakes, entrepreneurship is not for you. If you don't like being wrong, entrepreneurship is not for you. Because all those things happen, and we never talk about those honest things. And,
I wanted to point out or highlight is that we're human beings. We're going to make mistakes. We're going to make, whatever. We're going to stumble. We are not perfect, and it is okay to show that we are not perfect. I think we have become so afraid of we've got to have this facade, and that's why I appreciate you saying how much you appreciate the honesty, because it's what I wanted to bring across in the Women Who Mean Business, because you can mean business without having to be fake and not real, and you don't have to use these buzzwords like hustling, whatever they say.
I'm crushing it and killing it right now. In fact, I'm crushing and killing my Kegels while we're talking. I'm crushing and killing it and filling it and drilling it and sticking it, and all these awful metaphors. And it's not to poke fun at people who, if you want to use those metaphors, God bless you. Go do it. But I think we've lost something when we talk like that. We really lose the real behind the scenes. This is hard. We need to keep ourselves motivated. We need to support each other. Women supporting women, women supporting men, men supporting women. We all need to support each other. And I personally don't like the glamorization of busy and hustling. And I think that stuff is where did that come from?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Exactly. I don't know where it came from, but it's got to really stop. To be authentic and transparent here, we're going to use these two words. I'm authentic and transparent. This is my third business, right? My other two went kaput. I'm okay. God. And like you said, if you want to be an entrepreneur, yes, and you got to keep going. And so my first business was, and I'll back up for just a second. Both my parents were business owners.
Wow. Because
what do you do when you're an immigrant? You come here and all the schooling that you had in another country doesn't translate to here.
Yeah.
How do you support your family?
Yeah.
So they both had their own businesses, and I think that's kind of where it sparked it for me. I always knew I wanted to have my own thing. I just didn't know what yet. Mm-hmm. The ironic thing was that they wanted something safe and secure for me because they'd already gone through all this crap, right? Yeah. And so they wanted me to go to school. They wanted me to get that degree. They wanted me to go work for PricewaterhouseCoopers and be there for 50 years and retire from there, except that I didn't want that. I hated math. I know, so not stereotypical. I hated math. I hated accounting. I hated science, all that stuff. I was like, that's not me. And so I kind of had to buck the system a little bit in that sense too. And when you are in the Asian culture and you are a daughter and you're a girl, you are not expected to buck the system. Boys, they'll give them that leeway, but you are not expected to buck that system. You are expected to do every single thing that your parents tell you to do. Go marry that nice boy down the road, have kids, whatever, right? Well, here I am, 49. I didn't do it. Didn't do any of that. So my poor parents are like probably sitting there wringing their hands going, where did we go wrong? So, but I say that, I share that story because it was just funny and ironic to me that they didn't want me to ever be an entrepreneur. And I get it, right? Because they wanted me to have a safe and secure path. I get that.
Yeah.
I love the excitement of not knowing what's next. And I wanted to have my own thing, that I could call my own.
Yeah.
And my very first business was a photography business because I love photography. It was a beautiful hobby for me. I loved it. And I thought, I can parlay this into a business. And well, I had business, but I got to the point where I was burned out and I hated it. I hated it.
God.
I hated something that I used to love. And when you get to that point, you're like, oh, maybe this wasn't a good idea. And so I let that go.
Yeah.
Still a hobby, but went back into sales and did something. And then I started this, the payment processing company with my late business partner, which is now, no longer exists either for other reasons. So don't be afraid to try different things. I know it's a risk, obviously, financially and things like that. I just am fortunate enough that I don't have kids, so I don't have to worry about, oh my God, have to pay the bills and stuff. I do have to pay the bills, but I don't have kids to feed as well.
Yeah.
And I had a little bit more leeway than a lot of folks with families and things like that.
Yeah.
And I have a really great support network, though, too. Even though my parents may not agree with what I do, they're there to help and support if I need it. And my sister's very supportive, and so, it's great. But don't be afraid to fail, because your first business may not be the business you are in now, and it may not be the business that becomes the success.
So true. And we're so, I am so tired of leaders not really owning their failures. And it's like I know. Well, and if you're like, I live in Silicon Valley, right in the heart of entrepreneurial, activities. And if it weren't for people taking risks, nothing great would be built. I mean, people come here from all over the world based on a story of two founders founding a startup in a garage. That story is world renowned. So people come on faith for a better life based on that story. And so there is a lot of taking risks, and you're going to fail. And I failed, when I first started my business, and we all do. And I think there's no shame in it. And I think especially if you've done anything entrepreneurial, you should have had some failure in your resume. I don't think I trust an entrepreneur who's never failed, but.
Right. And I agree with you, because you have to think, okay, maybe they didn't take enough risks. So how are they talking to me about risk if they didn't fail? Because I feel like if you do step out on faith and you take a risk, then inevitably there has to be a misstep there. And failure, I think we have such a bad connotation of failure, right? Again, failure, it sounds so horrible. How could you fail? But really, it's just a chance to learn. Yeah. And I think for me, that moment of failure, because I grew up, I did well. I was always an A+ student because I was expected of me, blah, 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 all that stuff, right? Yeah. And then I go to college, and it was a whole different world, because I was no longer the big fish in a small pond. I was a very small fish in a humongous pond, because I went to UT, the University of Texas, which has 50,000 students, and so all of my classes were at least hundreds of students, and I failed for the first time in a class. It was a math class, and I hated it, but I didn't know how or where or who to look to for help. That was partly my own thing, right? Like, I can do this myself. I'm going to figure this out. And I really, that moment where I realized, oh my gosh, I could possibly really fail this class. And I just had this breakdown. Like, I sat down and I cried about it. And I was like, okay, now what?
Yeah.
And what?
Yeah.
And so I did it. I took it, basically. I was like, okay, I'll take the D or whatever it is that I ended up with, and move on from there, and just know that I'm going to avoid any math classes in the future. Because math was never my thing
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah. Take the requirements. Check the box. Move on. Move on.
It was really eye-opening for
Yeah.
someone who's always been like, oh, you're the success. And I think, too, I was done and I shouldn't say it was anybody else's fault, but I felt like it was a disservice not to really prepare me as a high school student for what could lie ahead, right? It's almost like the equivalent of coddling your child, and it's like, oh, you're the best thing. And yes, you want your child to think that they're phenomenal, can do everything, but you also want your child to fail.
Yeah.
So that teaches them something. And that's kind of what I felt like that freshman year. Once I got over that, okay, I failed, and the world didn't end, it was so liberating.
Yes. It really is. And I love that you say that, because I think that's so important. I mean, we have to have the experience of failure, and you can't let one little failure hold you back. I mean, now the first couple times I did comedy, I did well. And then I had a night where I didn't do well. And you learn, definitely it's painful. All those years ago, I think it was my third time at an open mic night, and it's just did not do well. Got heckled by a drunk guy, which I shut up, but I shut him up. But he was a sexist drunk guy, so I shut him up. But the thing about it was, you have to have those moments that make you appreciate that when things go right, how hard you have to work to get those things to go right. And if you're going to commit and do something like this that you really love, you're going to have to embrace the process. And sometimes shit's going to happen. Shit goes wrong. People don't like your stuff. And you cannot blame the audience. You cannot say, woe is me, poor me. You've got to keep up the next day and work harder. And I think nothing has taught me more, about an entrepreneurial mindset than comedy. It taught me how to fail. And I'm sitting here grinning because it's the only thing I can think of where people will fail, and still love the game and keep trying. And that is such an important thing. That's half the battle.
Yeah, and you're right. I think what we need to do is shift that mindset of failure is not the end of the world.
Yeah.
It is a learning experience that we can grow from. And there's a quote from Michael Jordan, and I know I'm not going to get it right, but I learned, or I succeeded because I failed at 1,000 other shots, right?
Yeah.
And for him, Michael Jordan, we think he's the greatest of all time in basketball, which he is.
Yeah.
He knows that he's failed, and that's how he's successful. He didn't let his fail stop him. It just helped him to improve his game. So then the next time he made that shot, miss it. And that's what we just, and we keep going.
Yes, and we keep going.
Miss the shot, I keep going, and I keep going.
Yeah, no, you do. You're like the Energizer Bunny. You keep going, and like in good ways. I mean, and that's a real conversation. What do you think? Looking at where you're at, because you've gone through having to come out of corporate, start a business, lose a partner, fail, try something new. You come here at 4, innocent, a child, through the love and bravery of your parents who wanted a better life. You've definitely had your share of yes ands, and I'm thinking to myself, all right, what's the biggest lesson that all these things have taught you?
Keep moving forward.
Yeah.
Take that time to step back, though, and really take care of yourself. Because after Steve passed away, I really kind of beat myself up for a while, because I was like, why am I still like this? Why can't I just move forward? Why am I still so sad? Why am I still grieving? Be sure to be kind to yourself and give yourself that time to grieve whatever it is, right? Grieve the failure, grieve the end of the business, whatever it is. There is a grief period.
Yeah. And
in my case, this, as you mentioned too, I'm going to grieve this loss for the rest of my life, because he was such a dear. And anytime you lose a loved one like that, everybody is. But also take it, because eventually I did. I got to a point. It's like 8 or 9 months later, I was like, you know what? I am tired of feeling like shit. I literally said that to myself. I was like, I'm tired of feeling like shit. How do I claw myself out of this hole?
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
Yeah.
So, yes, I felt, I was tired of feeling like this, and let's, take the next steps.
Yeah.
And so I use that as a lesson, and I think about, okay, if I made it through that really, what was a hard time, I call it my black hole of grief, then I can hopefully make it through just about anything else. And then thinking about what my parents went through just to get us here. I mean, that was a lot. It truly was a lot. And if we were able to get through that and still be here 40-something years later and live our lives the way we want to live it and be free.
Yeah.
Yes, and we keep going.
Yes, and you keep going. And your parents are doing great today?
Oh, they're great.
That's awesome.
My dad is 70. How old am I? I'm 49. He's 78.
Wow.
And I'll be 40. I will be 49. I'm making myself older than I already am. I'm still 48. I'm still 48.
And you're prepping yourself for the next birthday, so it's less of a shock. You're like, you're yeah.
True. Very true. So my dad refuses to retire because he loves being out and about, and he's kind of funny in a way. He had a couple of friends who passed away shortly after they retired, and he goes, "That's not happening to me."
Oh, I get it.
I gotta keep going so I don't pass away. But he truly just loves to be out and about. Yeah. So he has an air conditioning and heating business, and he still takes care of. And my mother's semi-retired and taking care of the grandkids and the grand fur baby now, and so they're both well.
That's awesome.
And I always joke, I think they can't really both be retired at the same time because they'll get on each other's nerves.
Yes.
And I'll have to then come in and referee like two kids or something.
Break it up.
They've been this is their 50th anniversary.
Oh my gosh.
So they've been married for 50 years, so you can just imagine.
Well, 50 years of seen some amazing ups and downs and some just all the changes in their lives. But what a story, though. I mean, that to me is such a beautiful journey. I mean, it's a credit to you, your parents, just to the whole spirit of everything, the whole arc of your story. With all the things you're doing, because you're doing some amazing stuff. And I just love your show. I love the way you straight talk, and I love straight talkers because real recognizes real. We talk about authenticity, and it's important, and it's become a buzzword, and you and I both agree it's so important. It's just I'm tired of brands talking about being authentic, but they really aren't. But you really exude that, and I think real recognizes real. So there's something in the way I think that you show up, that you just show up. You don't talk about it. Like I'm talking to Anna, y'all, and she does not. See, I'm saying y'all because it's just I feel so connected to her. But you just show up. You don't sit there and talk about authentic. You just show up, and you are that. And so. My question, yeah, I know you are. My question for you is how do you want to change the world? I mean, we all want to make a dent in the universe, and what do you see success look like for you? If you're able to do X, what is that?
It's such a great question, and I often think about what do I want my legacy to be?
Yeah.
As I mentioned, I don't have kids, and so for a lot of people that is their legacy. What will their kids do? So what can I do to change the world down the road for the next generation, right? Whether they are related to me or not, and even my nieces and my nephews. And so I'm still kind of trying to figure it all out. But basically, for now, what I'm doing now is how I hope that I'm making an impact is obviously highlighting these great women and sharing their stories, but I do a lot of volunteer work, and I always have. Volunteer work has been very important to me, even as a teenager. I took it upon myself to go volunteer at the hospital during the summer, back when there used to be candy stripers. Remember those? Yeah.
I do remember those.
I've already told you guys how old I am, but I would have dated myself already mentioning candy stripers.
No, I don't know what those are. I'm just too generationally young.
We had the cute little striped pinafores, and we volunteered in the hospital and all this stuff. So things, again, volunteering has always been very important to me. And my dad was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis about 16 years ago. And so I have been a very active and passionate, involved volunteer and board member with the Arthritis Foundation here in Houston. And I always joke that the staff just tells me where and when to be, and I show up, and I'm there so often that people will do think that I work for the foundation. And again, I have to say, well, I do work for them, but for free, right? And so that's how I'm hoping to make an impact right now. I hope that I am. But going forward, I want, especially from the generations after me and even my siblings in our family, I want them to understand where they came from.
Yeah.
And the sacrifices that, you know, my parents and their parents had to make to get here. Because my uncle, my dad's youngest brother, they have an amazing story. They were part of the boat people who came over. I don't know if you recall that whole wave of immigrants who came over after us, the first wave.
I do, and those were the kids that I played with in Arizona. They were boat people. Yeah, that's as much as I knew.
It is an even harder journey than ours. Because oftentimes, you know, they die at sea or they were robbed. I mean, it was crazy.
Yeah.
And so part of that, leaving that legacy for future generations, but also so others understand, is I want to write a book.
Yeah.
Everybody says this, when I want to write a book. But I don't want to write about business, because there's lots of business books out there. I want to share these stories so future generations will understand. And hopefully that will impact how they think of immigration going forward, and how this country is so great, and we have so much to offer everybody that we don't have to build a wall, we don't have to cut it off. We're human beings. Shouldn't we just think about helping each other?
And it's such a antithesis of who we really are as a country and what our collective shared stories are, that, you know, not going to say too much because, you know, we'll go in another direction, but expletive, censor, but yeah, it's such a violation, I think, of the spirit of who we are and the type of people that really define the American spirit. And you've got some amazing stories, and I hope you do tell those stories. I hope you do, because it's not about business. The reason business is so strong in this country is because we have those freedoms and we have that spirit that makes people want to go into business. And so it all starts with that narrative. I think that entrepreneurial spirit narrative. And, you know...
because many of my parents' friends went into business and started a business too. Because again, as an immigrant, and if your schooling does not translate to something here, you had been my dad was a teacher before in Vietnam. He could teach here, but he could start his own business and do something that he enjoyed doing. And so many of his friends have their own businesses as well. And I know, again, it's not unique in just the Vietnamese culture. I think it's immigrant cultures, you're going to find similar stories where they have their own businesses. Because what do you do when you come to a country where you still have to learn the language and have to support your family?
Somebody sent a thing around on Twitter not too long ago, and I wish I could remember where I saw it. I can't off the top of my head, but it was really beautiful. It was a long, long list of immigrants who've come to the United States and started successful businesses. And you think it's somebody like Andy Grove, who led Intel, and he was Hungarian Jewish. His family got out of Europe under Nazi, occupation. And so you can't tell me, and it was a list of all these amazing immigrant stories of people who they didn't just contribute to the fabric, they literally built jobs, the backbone of industry and tech, and all these amazing immigrants. And to me, that's what I think of when I think of Silicon Valley, when I think of our larger country. I think of all the people who have built these amazing things from all over the world. But for the fact that could only happen in America. So, let's keep that wall down. Unless it's a climbing plane wall with children. That's fun. But that's...
You're right. I think here in America, we have so many opportunities for business and to start business. And, Steve Jobs, if I am not mistaken, his dad was a Syrian immigrant.
Right. That's right.
Have Apple and Mac and the whole cult of Mac.
That's it. That's exactly right. So absolutely, those are amazing stories. Who do you have coming up on your? Give a little plug, because I really love, again, your Women Who Mean Business show. I just love the premise of it. So many badass women. So who do you have